as we talk about grace and truth about LGBT, what we're really going to be doing is concentrating this time on LGB, because the T of transgender has become its own craziness. We're going to have another class on God and gender and transgender later in the year. But there's so much misunderstanding about this topic, and I'm really glad to be able to talk with you about it. What I know about LGBT issues does not come from having read a few books or website articles. I have been serving with a ministry here in the Dallas area since 1998 for people who are dealing with unwanted homosexuality, whose faith is at odds with their feelings, and they want help dealing with it. And so much of what I'm sharing with you is the culmination of a lot of conversations with people, a lot of testimonies that I've heard from people. And particularly, I've learned how incredibly powerful Jesus is for overcoming feelings that don't match with God's intention. So, because this is a worldview class, let's look at the worldview perspective of this issue. I'm not going to address pantheism because they don't even talk about it much. But naturalism, when it comes to sexuality, says what is okay. If it exists, it must be fine, because everything evolved and it just happens to be here as the result of random processes. Christian theism says what we see around us has been warped by the fall. This is not the world as God created it. And the fact that there's so much sexual brokenness in the world is because of the impact of sin on the world. Naturalism says all feelings are normal. If you feel it, it must be fine because it's natural. Christian theism says LGBT feelings are abnormal. This is not what God intended when he created mankind in his image, male and female. Anything that's outside of that awareness and those feelings of attraction to each other in a holy context is not God's plan. Naturalism says all consensual activity is a viable choice. If two people want to do whatever they want to do, nobody should say anything about that. But God says all LGBT sexual activity is sin because, by definition, it's outside the marriage covenant, outside the marriage bed, which is the only place for sexual expression. And then naturalism would say there's no guilt with sexual differences. And so whatever you want to do it. It's no big deal. There's no God to say that there's any issues here. But Christian theism says acting outside of God's intention is a sin, but Jesus forgives sin and sinners. So I'm not going to take you through all the scriptures, but you do need to know what the Bible says. And so in your outline, I've given you these passages so that you know what the Bible says, but I'm going to skip over it because there's so much else to say. Here's what I am more excited about sharing than possibly anything else in the entire year about the gender spectrum. If I use that term, you probably think of this, a spectrum with masculinity on one end and femininity on the other. But I don't think that's the way it works at all. I believe that when God made us male and female, he created expressions, very wide range of expressions of masculinity on one spectrum and femininity on another spectrum, because males and females are very different, and we belong in two different categories from each other. This has been such a game changer for a lot of people over the 20 or so years that I've been teaching this, especially to moms of little kids. So let's talk about the masculinity spectrum. I believe what God showed me years ago is that He creates boys on a very wide range of masculinity. On the one end is your rough and tumble boys. The guy on top, yes, that is an actual frog hanging out of his mouth. Because,
a little bit of all of those.
Is that right? And down below, you've got 3 boys in their backyard with sticks or their limbs from a tree in their arms, because for a lot, why? What? Well, because for so many boys, they want to turn anything into a weapon. Things are about contests and wars and battles and winning. And I can't tell you, at our previous church, when I was like teaching vacation Bible school and there were little boys running around, they thought it was the coolest thing that Mrs. Bohlin walked around with her own weapon. And it was like, if you mess up, I will poke you. And I did. I'd be sitting in the church sanctuary for a presentation, and there'd be boys 2 or 3 pews forward, and I'd go around and boom, just let them have it in the back. It's like, hey, they just, and of course, it's like, what was that? And yet, I just got hit with a cane. How cool is that? But so many boys, they just come out of the womb as rough and tumble boys. Anything roughly spherical is going to be a ball, and I'm going to play it. If there's a tree or something that I can climb, I'm going to climb it. If there's any possibility of getting dirty, I'm going to get dirty.
Deliberately.
On purpose, that's right. The dirtier, the better. And often these boys are not real emotionally sensitive. They're just kind of missing it.
What?
So, a lot of boys are on that end of the spectrum. But on the other end of the spectrum are the sensitive, artistic, creative boys. And so the top picture is a little boy in his sister's skirt. And he's going to want to twirl around. And it's not because he wants to be a girl. It's because he loves motion and activity and colors that are bright and cheery and wonderful, and he's bored by boy colors, brown and navy blue and gray and black. That's boring. What'd you say, Jack?
They're boring.
They are boring, especially if you have a taste for the brighter colors. And so in the bottom picture are boys at a ballet bar. And some boys just come into the world, they were made to dance. I know one little guy, well, he's not so little anymore, he's in high school, but he would never walk from point A to point B if he could dance and twirl his way. He was just meant to dance. He is a ballet dancer these days, and he's incredibly gifted at that. By the way, several years ago, Dr. Bohlin got tickets for us to go to a Russian ballet in Belarus, and he got us front row seats. And I have never experienced, well, first of all, I've never seen an actual ballet. I have such respect for the male ballet dancers who are, I would put them as athletes against any football player, especially the ones, they lift up these ballerinas, and you would think that they weighed like 3 ounces. But they're just lifting them up and making it look effortless and easy. And I was so impressed with the athleticism of these men who had obviously worked really, really hard at that. Okay, so here are the 2 ends of the masculinity spectrum. And of course, you got everything in between. We have 2 sons. The older one heard this message and he said, "Mom, I'm really in the middle. I've got, yeah, it's kind of some of both, and I'm really comfortable in the middle. And the second one, when he was in 5th grade, he flopped down in a chair in the living room. He goes, "Mom, I'm such a girl." And I said, what does that mean? And he was not pleased about it, by the way. And he said, "'Cause I cry so easily." And I said, "You know, you're not a girl. You have a tender heart. You are a sensitive kind of boy. And at some point, some girl is going to think she hit the jackpot when she meets you. And I promise, God made you that way, and it's wonderful." He was also an artist, as he still is. That was how God made him. And he graduated with a degree in art education. And I told Kevin some girl was going to think she hit the jackpot. Her name is Lauren. They just celebrated their, I think, 18th wedding anniversary. And she does think she hit the jackpot. He is very, very masculine at the same time that he's very, very sensitive. Now here's the thing though. The vast majority of boys are on the rough and tumble side to the midpoint. Those who are the sensitive, artistic, creative ones are the vast minority, maybe between 5 and 10% of boys. And because they don't want to get dirty, they don't like contact sports, many of them don't have good eye-hand coordination, they don't want to be out there doing sports. And they're looked down on by other boys. It's like, you're not a good enough boy. And they get bullied a lot. It doesn't matter if you're talking school or the playground or church or online, they get bullied. And these are the guys that, if they're not supported in the type of masculine that they are, can believe the lie that they're gay. And they're not gay, they're just not a rough and tumble boy. The thing is, too, the artistic, creative, sensitive ones, often you'll find them in the performing arts. So the actors, singers, dancers, musicians, people who love to write poetry and stories. And they can be looked down on by the rough and tumble guys. And so for 35 years, this ministry that I've been affiliated with, Living Hope Ministries, we've had probably 6,000 people come through the ministry in that period of time. And almost all of the guys are the sensitive, artistic, creative ones. And they were beaten up for being different. But what they also were gifted and talented, just amazingly gifted guys. And so God says, I delight to make different kinds of boys, different kinds of men. And so we need to realize that God has the right, and it's a delightful thing that he does, to make different kinds of boys. So, Jack, where would you put yourself on the masculinity spectrum? Lily has an opinion.
Yeah, it's a bad one.
No, it's not.
Right, so it really changes a lot. Sometimes it's really rough and tumble, and sometimes it's really creative and sensitive. I don't know. I think I'm like right in the middle, leaning a little bit more towards rough and tumble. Oh, okay. Maybe a little bit more towards sensitive. Sometimes.
Okay.
Changes. Depends on the audience I'm around.
All right, so let me suggest something even cooler than picking a point on that spectrum by asking, where would you put Jesus on the masculinity spectrum?
The whole thing, literally.
Boom! You're the first person that ever said that. Because he was incredibly creative. He created the universe. Does he love colors and music? I mean, think about little boys who love pink and purple. It's like, so does Jesus. Have you ever seen a sunrise? He paints the sky pink. You know, there's nothing inherently disrespectful about pink. So he was very creative. Was he a rough and tumble guy when he was on earth? Well, yeah, he was a tradesman or a craftsman, carpenter type. He worked with his hands. Men flocked to him because he was a man's man. He took up the whole spectrum all at once. And some guys are just born with more bandwidth on the masculinity spectrum to begin with. And Jack, it makes sense that you would say, yeah, I take up more bandwidth. What I've noticed over years and years of observing people is that the more a man becomes like Christ and becomes more spiritually mature and more like Jesus, he starts taking up more and more space, bandwidth on the masculinity spectrum, and becomes the fullness of what it can mean to be male. So, of course, there's a femininity spectrum. On the one end, you've got your girly girls who come out of the womb going, I want a little pink tutu around my head, and then when I get old enough, I want a tutu around my waist, and put me in tights, and let me dance around and be a princess. And, they go for all things girly. On the other end of the spectrum, are tomboy jockettes who have no patience with pink and purple and sparkly and tutus and all that stuff. And some of them many of them are gifted athletes, very strong as an athlete. They can't stand wearing dresses. Often they have no patience for girl drama. They don't want to play house because nobody wins. So, and as is the situation with boys, there are way more girly girls than there are tomboy jockettes. And the girly girls look down their noses at the tomboys and say, there's something wrong with you because you're not like us. Like, we are the only acceptable expression of femininity. So, Sheridan, Lily, where would you put yourself on the femininity spectrum?
The middle, the whole thing, I don't know.
That's fair enough. You just take up a whole lot of bandwidth because you see yourself on both sides?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Sheridan, how about you?
Middle, closer to tomboy though.
Okay. The middle, closer to tomboy. And what's really cool is God is the one who chooses what kind of girl a girl is, what kind of boy a boy is. And you can grow in that, and you can start taking up more bandwidth. I've talked to a number of girls who grew up as tomboys, but who didn't struggle with their gender identity when they got older. And I would ask them, what did your parents do with you as a tomboy? And they all said the same thing. It's like, they celebrated me. They celebrated the way I am. And they didn't try to make me into something I wasn't. And they just supported me with my giftings and didn't try to make me into something other than how God made me to be. And then as they got older, they grew into into what?
Who they are.
Into who they are, yeah. And they were comfortable with their skins. And so tomboys, when they get married and have kids, they're the most amazing mothers of boys, because it's like, oh yeah, man, I'll show you how to throw a spiral. I know how to do that, You want me to show you how to climb a tree? I can do that. So, that, and the thing is too, because there are more girly girls and girls in the middle than there are tomboys, they're looked down on and made to feel other than. There's a lot of shame associated with feeling like you don't belong, and you don't belong to us, and you're not like us. And so these are the women that would come to Living Hope saying, I'm a lesbian, I don't want to be. I'm attracted to other girls, I don't want to be. I want to follow Jesus. And so they would come and get help. And what's really been cool is in the 30 or so years that I've been there, I've been to a number of weddings of people that came in attracted to the same sex, and then as they walked closer and closer with Jesus and they grew spiritually, they started developing feelings that they hadn't had before as they got closer and closer to how God wanted them to see themselves. So this is the basis of what makes a whole lot of sense in understanding the whole LGBT conundrum of feeling like your feelings are not what God intends for them to be. So many people who are dealing with LGBT issues have gender insecurity. So let me spend a couple minutes talking about what that means. Why would you not feel comfortable in the skin that God chose for you? Because who chooses our gender? How does he do that? How does he? What's that?
That's wild. She said he goes eeny, meeny, miny.
Whether you get the X or Y chromosome from your father. That's all that. That's how that.
What he said.
Yeah. So God is the one who determines whether you're male or female. If you're a girl, you have XX chromosome. If you're a boy, you have XY chromosome. Nobody makes that happen. God determines that. Well, in terms of understanding how people can feel insecure about their gender, let's talk about the 3 A's that wise people have been talking about for a long time. That God gives us needs for the 3 A's of attention, approval, and affection. So attention, what does that mean? In terms of a child getting attention from their parents.
You can do it lots of ways. You can cry really loudly. You can be super nice. You can give them money. Those are my ways. You can clean stuff. Or you can just be super annoying. You can hit things, people. I mean, yeah.
These are all things that
I'm naming my little siblings things.
Okay. So babies come into the world needing attention because they can't ask for what they need, right? I'm hungry. How do babies let their parents know that they're hungry?
Right.
Absolutely. There's like, pay attention to me and meet my needs. I'm
You're like, hey, over here.
over here. That's right.
Feed me already.
That's right. So we need that FaceTime. We need to know that our parents are looking at us. Babies, especially, need that contact with mom. By the way, this is such a cool thing God did. Scientists have figured out that right at birth, the best distance for making eye contact between a mother and the baby is the number of inches between the mom's eyes and the baby's face when they're nursing. And so when a baby is feeding at mommy's breast or being given a bottle and you're holding them in the same position, they're connecting eyeball to eyeball, and a child can literally see the reflection of his or her mother in the mom's eyes. And so it's like they know that mom is paying attention to them, and it's feeding their heart, feeding their soul that way. But we all need attention. That's why kids will be in the backyard going, Daddy, watch this. I'm on the trampoline, right? Daddy, watch this. And I have a friend that was on the back porch with another friend, and his daughter was calling out, Dad, watch me. And he wasn't. He was talking to his friend, and his friend said, dude, if you don't pay attention to your daughter, she'll go find somebody who will. It's like, oh yeah, good point. I think I'll watch.
Come over and beat up on you, which is what my brother does.
Oh yeah?
He'll come over and just go, hey, I'm over here. Watch what I'm doing. He'll just
All right.
talk to you and whack you until you pay attention to him.
That's one way to get attention. It's like a legitimate need. Another need is for approval. What do our hearts long to hear from our parents?
Good job.
Good job.
Get out.
I'm proud of you. I love you so much. I'm so glad you're in my family. You did great. Yeah. We so want approval and affirmation. And we also need affection. We need people to show us. Okay, y'all, please do not have an ongoing conversation between the two of you.
She's saying something about how her father loves her. I was like, I mean, your dad never said that before.
Okay.
Those are stabbing comments always.
So we need physical affection. We need our parents to hold us and love on us. And we also need verbal affection. We need to be told, I love you. And if you don't get those needs met, it leaves a hole in your heart. Have you guys ever seen NCIS, the TV show?
Parts of it.
Or there's a guy over a team of crime investigators,
Yeah.
Jethro Gibbs, and he's
Leroy Jethro.
Leroy Jethro Gibbs. And when he shows affection to the male team members by slapping them in the head. And these men love it. He's got women under him, and he never does that with them. He'll hug them, but he does this, this head slap, and they're like, he loves me. Because guys show affection to each other differently than girls do. And guys show affection to girls differently than they do other guys. Like slugging a girl, it's not okay.
That's the idea.
No. Have you ever gotten into trouble? You have two sisters, Jack.
I have. Whenever I was younger, I learned my lesson now.
You learned your lesson?
Yeah. My dad, I think I remember once, whenever my older sister Emily, she would always like beat up on me, and she's like, you can't hit me back because I'm a girl. Like, I'm gonna change that. And so like I just punched her one day,
You're like, what?
and because I was done, and my dad made me go outside and pick a switch for him to hit me with. So, and then I picked one that broke. That was like a little weak one, and then he went out and got it.
Got a replacement. Yeah.
And let me guess, that was the only time that ever happened.
Yes. I learned my lesson.
Because you're smart that way.
Yeah. I guess you could say that.
Okay, so how does your dad show you affection?
That's a hard question to answer. I don't know.
Okay.
It makes me work outside and doesn't give me any privileges. That's how.
Girls, how do your dads show you affection?
He gives me a house to live in. He feeds me most of the time.
Most of the time. Okay.
You don't need to be.
Yeah.
Does he tell you he loves you?
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Sheridan, how does your dad show you he loves you?
He works really hard, and he's working a job that he's better than because his company wants him there because he's good at it, but his skill set is not in it. And he's been traveling a lot, and airplanes take a lot out of him. But he works a lot so he can pay for me and my brother's sports. Because we did not pick cheap sports. Yeah.
You did not pick cheap sports.
I
So
figure skate.
figure skating. Ah, yeah.
Not cheap.
No.
And my brother does hockey.
Wow. Okay. So God gives every human being needs for the 3 A's. In this, there's nothing wrong with having these needs because God put them there. But sometimes those needs don't get met. And God's plan is at first level, we connect with mom because, mothers are the ones that carry babies in our bodies, and then we give birth to them, and then we feed them. And most women breastfeed. If you can't, you give them a bottle. But mom's doing a lot of the mother-child bonding type stuff. So we connect first to mom, and then after a couple years, little kids start realizing, in most families, there's another big person around here who's not like the mama. They're taller, they have a deeper voice, they're bigger. They don't treat children the same way that the mommy does. And God's plan is first we connect to mom, and then the next stage is we connect to dad. And then as we get older, like 4 to 10 years old, we start connecting with our same-sex peers. So boys just want to go play with other boys, and then they fight and they make up and they're all good buddies 30 minutes later. And then finally, as you approach adulthood, you start making connection with opposite sex peers. But before you can connect with the opposite sex peers, you need to know what it is to connect with people like you before you can connect with people who are really, really different from you. So these are the 4 stages that we go through. But if our needs aren't met, people get stuck and they stop growing emotionally. They can grow on the outside, but they're not growing on the inside. And so if you've got a hole in your heart from these needs not getting met, and then you hit puberty and there's a 600% explosion of hormones in your system, unmet needs go with hormones and it gets sexualized. And so the longing to connect either with a mom or a dad or same-sex peers, suddenly now there's a sexual component to it. And that's how people end up realizing, I like other girls or I like other boys, because there's an unmet need that gets connected with the sex hormones. It's not that people are born that way. Something went wrong in the growing up process. And so what they need to do is finish growing up and get those needs met. That's one of the reasons why it's so important to be connected to a church and have people who will love you in a way that is consistent with how God intends for us to love each other safely and kindly. So people just need to finish growing up. And everybody needs to embrace the kind of boy or girl that God made them to be, rather than react against gender stereotypes. So if you've got a tomboy jockette who's like, I don't like frilly and pink, I don't care about Barbie, people go, what's wrong with you? It's like, well, there's nothing wrong with her. She's just not digging the gender stereotypes. And if a boy doesn't want to climb trees, he doesn't like getting dirty, he really likes to cook, or he likes to read, and he wants to talk to people rather than fight against them, people go, what's wrong with you? You're not a good guy. The problem, he's fine just the way he is. It's the gender stereotypes that he's having a problem with. Gender stereotypes are not God ordained. It's just totally a cultural thing. By the way, in our culture, in the United States, we affiliate pink with girls. In Africa, pink, in many, many cultures, pink is considered the most masculine color. Colors are completely cultural. There's nothing intrinsic about them at all, and it's the stereotypes that get us into trouble. So I want to walk through lies that you hear in our culture about homosexuality. The first one is that it's normal and healthy, it should be celebrated. That is coming from an evolutionary perspective that says, everything is the way it is because it evolved that way, so there can't be anything wrong with it because it exists. But it's not normal. It's not normal and it's not healthy. It should certainly not be celebrated. Yes, it does occur. Until recently with social media, it was only popping up at 2 to 3% of the population. Now it's more than that because people are talking into each other into identifying as gay or lesbian. But the fact that it occurs doesn't make it normal. The fact that it occurs means we live in a fallen world. So God intends for male and female relationships to balance each other and complement each other. All you have to do is look at the biology of sex to realize that the male and female bodies were meant to fit together like a puzzle. And it's just as true in the psychology. We are so different and we complement each other. Later on in this course, Dr. Bohlin and I are going to talk about guys are from Mars, girls are from Venus, about gender differences that God ordains And it works really well for the differences to bring out the best in each other. So the thing is, male-female relationships, we get balanced that way. If you have two girls in a relationship or two guys in a relationship, there's too much of some stuff and not enough of what the opposite sex brings. When people feel like they're attracted to the same sex, it's like the red light on the dashboard of a car when it says check engine. Something's going on under the hood that needs to be checked into, because it's not normal, it's not natural to have sexual and romantic feelings for people of the same sex. When people act on their same-sex attractions, it's not healthy. Those who do are at far greater risk for sexually transmitted diseases, including AIDS. In the last few years, I'm not sure if you've seen, but on TV, on broadcast TV, we're suddenly inundated with commercials for drugs that people can take to keep their viral load of AIDS down. It's like, so that you can just keep on having sex with whoever you want, and then the AIDS won't kill you. And
Or you won't transmit it.
or you won't transmit it, yes. But there's a huge risk of STDs when people act on their same-sex attractions. There's far more incidence of alcoholism and drug abuse in those that are drawn to the same sex, because it's not normal, it's not healthy. Depression and anxiety has always been part of the LGBT community. Now it's like everywhere in the whole United States, and actually beyond the United States, especially ever since COVID, but depression and anxiety have always been a problem. The relationships are, but you have to manipulate and be harsh with other people in order to keep two people the same sex together. Have you ever played with a magnet where you had two of the same poles and you realize it's trying to push each other away? You have to flip things so that the negative and the positive are attracted to each other. When you've got two positives or two negatives and you're trying to make them come together, you have to do some weird stuff in order to make it stick, because there is a magnetic force that's pushing it aside. It's emotionally exhausting to keep unnatural relationships together. There's a shortened lifespan, especially for gay men, because what they're doing with their bodies is so unhealthy. And a friend of mine who was a lesbian activist for 25 years told me that for a lot of gay identifying women, they're at a far greater risk of cancer because they're not having babies. Their bodies are not functioning the way that God intends for most women to function. They're not having children, they're not breastfeeding, and they end up with a much higher cancer rate. Here's the second lie you hear in our culture. If you experience same-sex attraction, that automatically means you're gay or lesbian. It does not. Let's go back to these unmet, legitimate needs that God gives us for attention, affection, and approval. When someone is attracted to someone of the same sex, it means something's missing. Unmet needs. And what people are not telling each other is the truth that having crushes on other people of the same sex is a normal part of the transition from child to adult. It's just, we go from having a strong connection with mommy, a strong connection to daddy, and then we have a strong connection with people of the same sex that are like us, because we're learning how to attach to people other than family members. It's an absolutely normal part of adolescent growth. The third lie that you hear is, since you were born that way, you can't change. Have you ever heard anybody say, people are born gay? Mm-hmm. If you were to ask that person, how do you know? They go, everybody knows that, but how do you know? Because they say people are born gay. And where's the evidence for it? There isn't any. There is no scientific evidence of a genetic cause for homosexuality. In fact, they did a landmark twin study of many, many identical twins. What's the thing about the genetic connection between identical twins? Are they? Yeah, exactly. They have the exact same DNA. And the thing is, if homosexuality were genetic, then if one person were gay, the identical twin would be gay 100% of the time. For example, you can't have identical twins where one is male and the other is female, because identical means the same, right? Well, it turns out that in identical twins where one identifies as gay, the other one identifies as gay only 11% of the time. If it were a genetic issue, they have the same DNA, that would never happen. It would be 100% correspondence. And so the fact that they had a twin study proved there is no genetic cause for homosexuality. The thing is, too, that thousands of people report that there's been a significant change in their same-sex attractions. When you walk with Jesus and you start growing in the person that he means for you to be, things change. Change is possible. There were even former homosexuals in the church at Corinth. 1 Corinthians 6:11 has a list of sins and vices. Adulterers, kidnappers, people doing all sorts of things. And it says, and such were some of you, past tense, but you were washed, you were sanctified, you were justified in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. So there were former homosexuals in the church at Corinth. That is absolutely the same truth today. And so, just as I land the plane, it's so important to show grace to strugglers, and I'm proud of all three of you. The essay questions that you answered for the quiz, you all identified the need for grace and compassion, all three of you. I'm so proud of you. That has to be our starting point and our ending point. Something to remember is that nobody chooses to have same-sex desires. When people start getting older, and they realize that, oh my gosh, my heart is going to people of the same sex, they're usually horrified by it, and they start, especially if they're Christians, God, let me wake up not having these feelings tomorrow. But it doesn't work that way. The Lord works with us to be thinking differently. When someone has crushes and strong feelings, it's a part of adolescence. It doesn't mean somebody's gay. It means they haven't finished growing up yet. Do you know when your brain is finally finished maturing?
21 or 22?
25.
I know it was 20-something.
Which is why to ask a 12-year-old or a 14 or 15-year-old, so are you gay, lesbian, bi, transgender, whatever? They still have over 10 years before their brain is finished maturing. People need to do is talk about the fact that you're going to go through some very confusing feelings. Just cool your jets. Don't make decisions that are going to affect you for the rest of your life, which is when we talk about transgender. It's heartbreaking with what people are doing to try to, and they're ruining their bodies long before their brain catches up. So be compassionate, because you don't know who struggles or who loves someone who struggles with same-sex attraction. I am so impressed with the fact that when Moses asked God, who are you? And who should I say is sending me to the children of Israel, when God wanted Moses to lead the Israelites out of Egypt. And God identifies himself to Moses and says several things, 6 things about himself. The very first thing he said is, I am Yahweh, Yahweh, I am compassionate. That's the first thing. God didn't say, I'm holy. He didn't say, I'm not like you. He didn't say, I'm mad. He said, I'm compassionate. And one of the things that really impressed me was to learn that the root word for compassionate is the Hebrew word for womb. And so, the same way that a mother just has compassion and tender feelings toward her children, that's how God feels toward us. So we need to be compassionate toward everybody. And I have a feeling I don't need to say this to you three, but be respectful. No name calling. It's just so incredibly hurtful. I was talking with a teacher. She had a jar in her classroom, and every time anybody called somebody else gay, fag, queer, homo, any of the slurring terms, they had to put $5 in the jar. It's like, you are not allowed to say those things. It's ugly and it's hurtful. My friend Hope, who spent 25 years as a lesbian activist before she became a Christian, she's the one that asked, is it the most loving thing to allow people to believe that it's okay to be gay or trans? Because that's not how what God intends for us. And for people to believe that it's okay to be something that God did not create us to be, that's not loving. Please remember the role of spiritual warfare. Jesus said in John 10:10 that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, and his native tongue is lying. There's so much spiritual warfare in the LGBT world and community. People believe lies about themselves. And the final thing that I wanted to say is that people who experience same-sex attraction or a transgender identity are wounded and deceived, and Jesus loves them.